Chris Manning, thanks so much for taking a few minutes to join us. We appreciate it.
Thanks, Matt. I appreciate the offer.
Absolutely. Let's start with libertarians. What would it mean to have a libertarian in Congress?
I think first off, it'd be historic since no libertarians ever won running as a libertarian. But two, what it also means is an effort and an ability to create, real bipartisanship, and in this case, tripartisanship, because libertarians have so much crossover ideologically with the two main parties, and it's very easy then for me to work with both sides of the aisle and to do that realistically.
Um, in Washington, as you know, it's a pretty contentious environment right now. How would you sort of work to ingratiate yourself with leaders of both parties, and wouldn't aligning with one on one issue and another on another issue put you at somewhat of a disadvantage?
No, I don't think so. Obviously, during this campaign, there's always an opportunity for candidates to take shots at each other. I don't know if you've seen the two debates that I was invited to. They always have a candidate questionnaire, and that's always intended to kind of get the candidates to go after each other. And I think you've seen I choose not to take that opportunity, not to take that bait, and instead I maintain a positive focus. You won't hear me dragging my opponents, and so taking that mentality to Washington D.C. allows me to work with people, because let's be honest about what Washington is. If you're trying to get something done, it's about your interpersonal communication and your relationships with people. And we used to have that ideal, that as a representative, your job was to go and create that bipartisanship. And I think veterans, particularly, there's very strong evidence that shows that veterans in particular are the most bipartisan and tripartisan, representatives in Congress. And again, I have that going for me. And so I think by simply being true to myself and maintaining that characteristic in DC is going to go a lot further than having disagreements on certain policy issues with one side and the other.
Would you attempt to caucus with either party, or would you kind of leave it to, as you said, that interpersonal communication?
I leave it to the interpersonal. I think if I were to go and then I just immediately caucus with one party or the other, I think that kind of ruins my image as being independent, and that's really what I want to project. There are certain caucuses that aren't aligned along party lines that I think would be beneficial. And one of those is the Problem Solvers Caucus, where obviously, if you've paid attention to my campaign, I'm very much a solutions-oriented person. And so I would look at, okay, what is the best way to get something done while still staying true to my principles? So that's a caucus that I would be interested in.
Sure. We make a big deal in New Mexico, especially in political campaigns, about being, sort of from here. And you are. You have a different view of that, though, because as is allowed, you live in Farmington. That's outside of the district.
Mhm.
I guess the question is, why don't you live in the district? And if you did represent it, would you plan on moving to it?
Yeah. I lived in Albuquerque as a child. I grew up and did K through 3, third grade in Albuquerque. I went to Apache Elementary School, and like many parents and families in New Mexico, the crime and poor education in Albuquerque was a driver of why we left. My mom was terrified of me going to junior high and high school in Albuquerque, and so when an opportunity presented to go home and live in a little bit more, I would say, obviously a safer neighborhood for raising me, my parents took that opportunity. And unfortunately, a lot of people are making that decision. And I think the census data shows so many people are actually leaving the state. They're not just moving to different parts of the state like my family did. They are moving out of the state. And until we change our education and our criminal justice in Albuquerque, that's going to be the way things are in the future. And I think obviously having a degree in secondary education with my emphasis in history, I have a view of how to change education that I don't think any of my competitors have. And even though this is a national race, you have the federal office, you don't see a whole lot of education policy. Education is something I focus a lot on. You'll see I understand that relationship between education and crime. I bring it up often that until you change the education, you can't really change the crime.
Okay. Do you have a feeling of whether or not you'd try to maintain some sort of a residence here if you did win?
I don't know. And that would be hard because I literally just bought my house. I'm a first time homeowner. I signed the closing documents the day after I filed to run. And so the idea of doing that all over again is kind of daunting. But I also think one of the great things about technology, and unfortunately, one of the few bright glimmers of COVID, is that it showed that you can be anywhere and still be a good representative. For right now, a classic example, right now, you and I are having a video conference and it's good connection. It's not like it was 10 years ago. And the truth of the matter is your representative is in DC the majority of the time. So is my address where when I'm home a couple of weeks out of the year going to make a difference? When I have a philosophy of being very open, and you'll start seeing in these last 2 weeks where I'm going to be hosting Facebook Live events, YouTube events. I'm going to be doing a lot of online stuff, which anyone in the district then can attend. Anyone in the district can come. And I think that actually will make me a lot more available to the voters. And I'm going to take that same mentality to DC. It's not just a campaign thing. Obviously with the technology that we have, there's no reason not to continue to host these town halls where you can have 1,000 people attend rather than say 50 in person. So I'm going to take the benefits that we have right now and apply them if I were elected to represent the district.
Great. Well, let's get into some policy stuff. And you mentioned education, and you're right. There's not a whole lot that you do on the national level to impact what's happening in classrooms necessarily. I'm curious, going into higher education, what do you see as New Mexico doing right and perhaps wrong in how it handles higher education, trade schools, technical schools, that sort of thing?
Yeah, I think over the last several years, and I'd say maybe more than a decade, there's been too much of an emphasis on a college degree as your only ability to really provide for yourself in the future. When you really look at the data, only about 25% of New Mexicans have a college degree. So what are you telling these 75% of people who don't have that degree? What are we doing to help them? And I'm a big proponent of teaching kids in high school, taking in essence the Nordic model of education. And you have this kind of bifurcation of those who are looking to go to college and those who are looking to do trade skills. And I am a very big advocate of bringing back those trade skills that we used to have in the 60s and 70s. You want to be a mechanic? Let's teach you to be a mechanic. You want to be a cosmetologist? Let's get you your barber's license while you're still in high school. So the day you graduate, you now have a marketable skill, which pays well above the minimum wage. And I think that does a lot to reduce, the poverty here in New Mexico, because what happens if you focus on that and we get you some sort of certificate, some sort of training, it helps the economy, but it helps you, the individual, a lot more. And so my focus is going to be more on the majority of people who don't go to college. I think there's already enough messaging for those who do, but I want to see a transition. Another area that I've talked about is the FAME program. And Kentucky implemented this several years ago in their community colleges. And it's a mix between your, in essence, getting a 5-semester degree, associate's degree, while at the same time working in a manufacturing company. So the company is kind of helping pay the cost, and you get on the job training and you get paid. So you're getting paid to go to school. And then at the end of this program, the average FAME graduate 1 year out is making $59,000 a year. 5 years out, they're making $98,000 a year. I'm looking for ways to help people make 6-figure incomes that don't require 4-year degrees.
You've talked a lot about health insurance as being maybe the biggest issue for you. Only about 4% of New Mexico right now is on an individual plan, which you're a proponent of. Yes. Talk to me about how you would encourage the U.S. to move away from an employer-sponsored model onto an individual plan or an individual model.
Sure. And I think you take the Affordable Care Act as an example. And what was it based on? It was based on the Swiss healthcare system. And if you look at the Swiss, they have 100% individual health insurance plan. And so you make that philosophical leap. Okay, so we implemented a lot of the Swiss issues with the Affordable Care Act, but we didn't make that final transition, which would actually make it workable and move to an individual plan. Next thing I always talk about is when you lose your job, as so many people did during the pandemic, what do you also lose? You lose your health insurance, right? What if you want to change jobs or you want to take 6 months off? You don't do it. So many people don't do it because they're afraid of losing the health insurance. The second thing I talk about is we have to make it our plan, and really this is that where Congress has to step up. We have to make the laws that make this possible. And for me, you have to marry one of the advantages we have over the Swiss, and that's our health savings account. The implementation of an individual health care plan, direct primary care, and health savings accounts makes an individual system completely workable. You have to have all three of those. And really, it's just a law in Congress which prevents you from having a health savings account with any policy. It's really, that's all it is. It's simply Congress wrote a law that says you can only have a health savings account if you have a high deductible health plan. Why? What is the point in limiting that? What is the point in limiting your ability to pay for future financial, medical emergencies? I don't see the logic in it. So I think if you can pitch that and you show how the individualization and this health savings accounts allows you as the family to make decisions of what coverages do you need, the ability to change your coverages at any time, just like you do with your car insurance. I want to make insurance a lot more personable. And I think it's out there. It's something that we can do. And if you can pitch that and you show people the advantages, particularly direct primary care, where you actually avoid insurance companies and get so much better care, when people see the studies on it and the realities of people who've made that switch, I think it'll work. But it'll be a slow process, and it'll be something that I have to fight, obviously, the insurance companies because they don't want it. You have to fight the lobbyists because they don't want it. And you have to fight unions and corporations who like what they've got going right now. It's a tough fight, but that's why I address the people.
Chris, can you explain direct primary care in just about 30 seconds? I want to get to other stuff too, but I want to make sure we're clear on that.
Sure. So direct primary care is basically you avoid using your health insurance to have access to your primary care physician. You pay a low monthly fee between $30 and $75 for an individual to $150 a month for a family, and you get unlimited access to your primary care physician. It allows for text care. It allows for home care. And so many direct primary care physicians make house calls, right? And you get on average 40 minutes a session when you actually do have to go in. 90% of them offer same day or next day appointments. So it's something I'm going to talk about in my first Facebook Live event. So follow my campaign and we'll have that next week where I dive deeply into that.
All right. Let's move to foreign affairs, sort of. First of all, you served in Afghanistan, if I'm correct, and I'm curious your thoughts on the Biden administration's decision to announce that they'll be withdrawing completely from Afghanistan this fall.
I think it's a good policy, and I support it, and it's something I think is almost a decade late. Obviously, libertarians are very much against foreign wars. I'm no stranger. I've been there, and really the mission has been over since, at least in my eyes, since Osama bin Laden was killed. There was really nothing left after that for us to do. But instead, we've been trying to do a nation building in one of the poorest countries in the world, which honestly, the Afghan people haven't decided that they want to be a nation. And until the Afghan people decide that that's what they want, there's nothing that the United States can do can force that. But also our leaving us, and a lot of the criticism is, it'll embolden the Taliban. Well, so much of the Taliban's enlistment is simply because they have so many foreign, as they see it, foreign fighters in their nation. And so when that's removed, that drives up a lot of their recruitment, because now what's the Taliban going to tell the people? Oh, we have to fight other Afghan people now? And that's not nearly as easy a sell for them. So I think a lot of the worry about leaving Afghanistan is overblown.
What do you think of President Trump? He had an America First stated policy and said that he wanted to get us out of endless wars. He didn't get us out of Afghanistan. Is there anything you see to take from his policy?
Well, about the only thing I'd say that he did really well was he didn't start any new wars. And he's the first president almost in my lifetime who didn't do that. And I think that obviously he recognized that these foreign wars weren't in America's interest. being in Iraq is not in our interest anymore. Being in Syria, keeping that civil war going on is not in our interest. Being in Somalia is not in our interest. I think after nearly 20 years and the dozens of countries that we have been fighting in and service members have been in, I think it's time to realize that we are doing more harm to our national security by keeping such a large footprint, so thin. And what we need to do is we need to bring all the troops home from these foreign engagements. We need to allow the military time to recover, to rebuild itself, because just even if you don't have combat losses of men and material, a constant war footing wears out material. And so planes, which were supposed to last for another 30 years, are only going to make it 10 because we put so many flight hours on them. And those are big structural changes to the military that we need.
I can think of a couple of businesses that wouldn't be wild about that plan, though.
No, and military industrial complex, which we were warned about, isn't either. But you also have to understand the military has actually been asking for years to do a base realignment and closure. And a couple of years ago in the defense authorization, Congress passed an amendment in there and said, we're going to approve the money, but we are forbidding the military from doing a study on a base realignment and closure. And the military is saying that they have about 20% excess capacity. And so, again, this is one of those areas where we allow corporations and the idea that the military is an employment factory, which we have to get around, we have to stop, right? The point of the military is not to keep people employed. The point of a military is to keep the nation safe. And that's why you get such a fight, especially in Congress, about base realignment and closures, because it could affect their district. And maybe it's their base that is this, the military says, well, we don't need this. And so you have job loss. But again, if we're really looking at national security, we have to focus on that aspect, that is not the job of the military. They are not an employment factory.
Sure. Chris, we just have about 3 minutes left here, or a little less. I do want to talk about criminal justice reform. Again, you're not running for mayor of Albuquerque or the Bernalillo County Commission, but there is an agreement right now with the Department of Justice and APD over policing practices. Do you think that the Department of Justice should allow the city to exit that agreement?
There was a study that came out not too long ago, I believe done by Harvard, that showed that when the DOJ comes into these cities and gets into these agreements with the police departments, you see an increase in crime. So I don't see that these have actually benefited any of the police departments that have entered into those agreements with the DOJ. But as far as what we should do at the federal level, obviously I'm an advocate of the decriminalization of drugs, the possession and use of it. New Mexico recently legalized marijuana, but at the same time, this is the area I like to highlight, the difference between legalization and decriminalization. Let's say you're driving in your car and you've got 2 pounds of tobacco in your vehicle. Police pulls you over for speeding. What are they going to do with the tobacco? Well, nothing. They're going to let you go because there's nothing criminal about carrying tobacco. But what if you have 4 ounces of marijuana on you now? Well, now you're a criminal because you're over that 2-ounce limit. And so people have to understand that as long as there is an incentive for the police to put you in jail, or the government to put you in jail for something where there is no harm done, I'm going to be opposed to that. And I think when people look at, I point to Portugal and their decriminalization of use of all drugs in 1999 and the success that they had in reducing crime and reducing drug overdoses. When people understand that it isn't that scary and that it's actually successful, it's a lot easier to sell. We're there on marijuana. The hard sell is all the other drugs and realizing how much better this nation would be if we did decriminalized it.
I just want to take one more minute and talk about guns, if you can. I know this is not enough time to devote to the topic. Does America have a gun problem?
Guns are the easy scapegoat because they're the tool that we use. And I like to remind people that, it doesn't matter who has a gun. If I have a gun, nobody gets harmed, right? I'm not going to go out and create a crime with a gun because of who I am as an individual. We have to recognize that really it's a societal problem. And it's real easy to try and say, oh, well, we need to just ban guns and everything will be good. But you do nothing to address the societal issues that cause the crime. And until we do that and we recognize that it's the person who's holding the gun that we have to change, not the law on gun possession, when you have that argument and people make that realization, I think then we can actually move forward and improving our the gun crime in America.
Chris Manning, we thank you so much for taking part of your day to chat with us. We really appreciate it.
All right, Matt, thanks so much.